My brother told my parents I quit the Navy. I didn't. 12 years later. Picture this. A military courtroom. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And a mother, sitting in the third row, watching her son at the defense table, completely unaware that in about 30 seconds, her daughter is going to walk through that door wearing a uniform she was told didn't exist anymore. That daughter is me. And what you're about to hear isn't some Hollywood plot twist. It's 12 years of my life, one brother's jealousy, and a secret buried on page 61 of a federal investigation file that changed everything. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why silence can be its own kind of crime. Let's get into it. There's a specific kind of quiet you only find in government buildings. Not peaceful. Heavy. The kind that sits on your shoulders the second you walk in. I'd played this moment out in my head before, not in some desperate, obsessive way. That's never been who I am. But late at night, in the stretch of hours before a 5 a.m. wake-up call, your brain wanders into places you didn't invite it. I used to wonder what my parents' faces would do the day they finally saw me standing there in dress blues. Whether my mom would tear up. Whether my dad's jaw would do that thing it does. I never once imagined it would happen in a courtroom. And I definitely never imagined my own brother would be the reason. My heels hit that polished floor and announced me before I said a single word. I walked straight to the panel table, set my folder down, squared it off exactly the way 12 years of training had drilled into me. Only then did I turn around and look at the gallery. Third row. There they were. My dad's hair had gone almost fully silver. My mom looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe that's just what over a decade does to the people in your memory. It shrinks them down until reality hits you like a slap. They were staring at the defense table. At Tom. Watching him with that specific nervous pride parents have at a recital, the kind that doesn't yet know the show is already over. Then my mother's eyes drifted upward. Found me. Her hand shot to her mouth. My father grabbed the bench in front of him so hard I could see the tendons pop in his forearms. And Tom noticed me half a beat later, and every ounce of color drained out of his face like water pulled down a drain. For one strange, suspended second, nobody in that room breathed. Then I sat down, opened my folder, and got to work. Because that's what 12 years teaches you. You don't fall apart in front of people who abandoned you. You do your job. To understand any of this, you need to understand the town that built it. Hopewell, Virginia. Population barely 12,000. One high school. The kind of place where 3 generations of the same family live on the same street, and everybody already has an opinion about which sibling is the good one. In my house, that was Tom. For years older than me. 6'1", our dad's jawline, our mom's eyes, and a smile that opened doors before he even knocked. Teachers loved him. Coaches loved him. The pharmacist gave him a senior discount at 22 because he was charming enough to ask about her hip surgery. Tom had never once had to earn affection in his life, which meant he'd also never had to wonder if it was real. And then there was me. Smart, people said, but serious. Doesn't smile enough. My 6th grade teacher literally wrote in a progress report that I could stand to relax a little, a note my mother kept in a shoebox in the hallway closet for reasons I still don't fully understand. I joined the Navy at 19. Not out of desperation. I had a partial scholarship to Virginia Tech sitting on the table. I walked away from it because structure made sense to me in a way that Hopewell never did. Because I'd watched my father give 30 years of his life to a company that laid him off 6 weeks before his pension kicked in. And I decided, quietly, that I would build something in my life that nobody could ever rip out from under me. I told my parents on a Sunday afternoon, pot roast on the stove, windows cracked open. My dad nodded slowly and told me he was proud. My mom cried, the good kind, she said. Tom wasn't there. Tom was almost never there that year. My mother called it a rough patch. I understood it as drinking too much and doing too little, and somehow still being forgiven every single time. 3 weeks later, I shipped out to boot camp. I wrote home religiously. My mother answered every letter on the same yellow legal pad she kept by the phone. My dad's cards were short, working hard. Good. But I loved him for that precision, because that was simply how he loved. 8 months into my assignment at Naval Station Norfolk, 8 hard, good months, the kind that forged something permanent in you, I came home for Christmas. And Tom was waiting. I had no idea it was already happening. That's the piece I've replayed 1,000 times since. The lie was in motion long before my car even hit the driveway. Here's what I eventually pieced together, mostly from silence and inference, because Tom never gave me a full explanation, not even standing in a courthouse hallway with our parents 3 feet away and nowhere left to hide. For 8 months, Tom had watched our parents light up every single time my name came up. Every letter read aloud at dinner. Every phone call. And something ugly in him, the specific rot that grows in people who've never had to fight for love, couldn't tolerate it anymore. So he lied. Quietly. Not with theatrics. Tom never needed theatrics. He was worse than that. He was believable. Over dinner, he told our parents he'd talked to someone on base. That the Navy wasn't working out for me. That I'd asked for a discharge and was too ashamed to admit it myself. He told them to expect a call where I'd try to explain, and that they should go easy on me because I was fragile right now. He told them, don't push. So when I called a few weeks later, my mother's voice was careful, painfully gentle. The tone you use with someone you think might shatter. I had no idea what was underneath it. I just thought she sounded tired. Then I came home for Christmas, and my father opened the door with a look I had never once seen on his face. Not anger. Something colder. Disappointment, the kind that's already grieving the person it expected you to be. We raised you better than to lie, he said. I told him I didn't understand. He said Tom had told them everything. I said Tom didn't know anything. And that's when I saw Tom in the hallway behind him, shaking his head slowly, wearing a look of rehearsed sorrow he'd perfected his entire life. My father closed the door. I stood on that porch for exactly 4 minutes. I know because I counted every second. Then I walked to my car, drove to a motel off Route 1, sat on a bed with a floral comforter and a broken air conditioner, and stared at the wall until something inside me went completely still. Not numb. Still. There's a difference. And in that stillness, one thought surfaced clear as glass. You have a choice right now. Let this break you or go back to work. I chose work. People ask me, once they hear the outline of this story, whether it destroyed me, whether I collapsed. I understand the question. But it's the wrong one. The real question isn't what that betrayal did to me. It's what I built inside of it. I won't pretend the years were clean triumph, because that would be its own kind of lie. There were nights on deployment, the Gulf, the Pacific, that specific brand of loneliness you feel in a steel bunk surrounded by 200 strangers, when I thought about the Christmas card I'd mailed and wondered if my mother even touched it before throwing it out. There were mornings I watched fellow officers take calls from their parents and felt something twist in my chest that I refused to call grief, because grief is supposed to require a death, and my parents were very much alive. They were choosing this. Year 3, a card came back stamped "Return to Sender." I held it for a long time. Then I put it in a box and mailed another one the following December anyway. Every year after that, no return address. Just, love you. Thinking of you. I didn't want to hand them another chance to send it back. I just wanted proof, somewhere out there, that I still existed to them. Not one reply. Not a single one. So here's what I did instead of falling apart. I made E5 by year 3. My commanding officer at the time, a man with 21 years in, and the kind of stare that could end an argument without a word, pulled me aside after my promotion and told me, "Mitchell, you are constitutionally incapable of doing anything halfway. That's either going to make you exceptional or it's going to break you. Figure out which." I thought about that sentence for years. I made chief by year 6. By year 8, I applied for officer candidate school. 31 years old late, people reminded me constantly, as if I hadn't noticed, and I graduated from OCS in Newport, Rhode Island, on a rainy Tuesday, with my 18-month-old daughter in the audience in a yellow raincoat that made her look like the world's tiniest harbor inspector. That daughter is Emily. She deserves her own paragraph, because she's the part of the story that refuses to fit neatly into tragic survival tale. Her father, Marcus, was a good man, an IT specialist I met during my second deployment, but fundamentally out of step with the life I was building. We tried. We failed. And we did it without cruelty, which honestly might be one of the proudest accomplishments of my adult life. He's remarried now, out in Seattle, wonderful with Emily during her summers there. She's 7 now. Fearless. She has never once seen me cry. When I made lieutenant commander, she was 5, sitting front row, dress wrinkled from the car ride, legs swinging because her feet couldn't reach the floor. When I walked off that stage, she looked up at me and said, completely deadpan, "Good job, Mom," like she was signing off on a satisfactory performance review. I laughed so hard I had to pick her up just to hide my face in her hair. That night, once she was asleep, I sat on my porch and thought about the 2 empty seats at that ceremony. My parents had missed every single milestone of my adult life, all because of one lie and one brother. It landed on my desk on a Monday morning in February, routed through standard channels, flagged for officer review due to the severity of the alleged offenses and the number of commands involved. The cover sheet read, "Investigation File, Mitchell, Thomas A., Petty Officer First Class. Falsified logistics documentation, multiple counts." I read the name twice. Checked the date of birth. Checked the hometown listed Hopewell, Virginia. My brother had enlisted 5 years after I did. After telling our parents I'd quit. After years of being the son who stayed, the one who got to sit at every holiday table while I mailed cards into a void that never answered. Tom had joined my branch of service. Made petty officer first class, which, to be fair, takes real time and real competence to achieve. And then, apparently, once actual competence ran out, he'd done what Tom always does. He faked it. The file ran 73 pages. I read every one before 8 a.m. Tom had spent 4 years as a logistics coordinator at a naval station in Washington state. His job was simple on paper: verify equipment shipments, confirm inspections, certify that things existed, worked, and were where records said they were. They weren't. Or he never checked. Or both. Over 18 months, he'd signed off on 34 inspection reports for equipment that was either missing, unverified, or documented as arrived when it hadn't been. Total value of the mishandled equipment, $340,000. A chunk of it simply gone. Investigators were still tracing the rest. My commanding officer called me into his office at 8:30. 27 years of service, former JAG, a man who picked his words like a surgeon selects instruments. You've seen the Mitchell file? Yes, sir. You two related? He's my brother. He studied me for a long moment, not unkindly. We can pull you off the oversight panel if you need that. Part of me, the part that still remembered a closed front door and a shoebox full of returned mail, wanted to say yes. Let somebody else sit across from Tom. Let somebody else watch our parents' faces while the evidence got read out loud. But I hadn't earned oak leaves on my shoulders by walking away from hard things. I can handle it, sir. He held my gaze another few seconds, then nodded. Your parents will likely be present. Next of kin was already contacted. Understood, sir. I walked back to my office, sat down, pressed both hands flat against the desk just to feel something solid. Then I opened the file to page 1 and started taking notes. This is the part of the story I've never told publicly before. The part that reshapes everything you've heard so far. Buried deep in the administrative section of Tom's service record, the boring bureaucratic pages most people skim right past, was a formal letter Tom had submitted to Naval Personnel Command back in 2014, 7 years earlier. The letter itself was routine on the surface, a request to update his emergency next of kin notification records to include our parents. But attached to it, as supporting documentation of family ties, was something else entirely. A personal letter. Written by Tom. Addressed to our mother and father. I won't reproduce it word for word here. I'm honestly not sure I could get through reading it out loud even now. But the part that mattered, the part that made me sit back in my chair, cover my mouth with my hand, and stare at the wall for 6 straight minutes said, in essence, this. Tom admitted that I had never quit the Navy. That he lied because he was young, jealous, and too much of a coward to say any of it out loud in person. He wrote that he wanted it documented somewhere, in case anything ever happened to him. He wrote that I deserved better parents than the ones he'd let me have. The letter was dated 2014. Delivery confirmation showed our parents received it in March of that year. They never called me. Not in 2014. Not in 2015. Not once across 7 consecutive years, the same 7 years I kept mailing Christmas cards into total silence, and they kept choosing not to answer. They had known the truth the entire time. And they said nothing. I didn't sleep at all the night before the hearing. That's not a complaint. I've survived on far less sleep than most people think is possible, but I want you to feel the texture of that night, because it matters. Emily was with her dad that week, so my apartment was completely silent. I sat at my kitchen table with Tom's file and a yellow legal pad, the exact same brand my mother used to write her letters on, and I organized my documentation for the panel. I wasn't Tom's judge. My role was procedural: verify the chain of evidence, flag inconsistencies, confirm the investigation met the standard required to move forward with formal charges. I worked from 9 at night until well past 1 in the morning. Then I went through it again. Around 2 a.m. I made tea and stood at the window watching a stray cat cross an empty parking lot under orange sodium lights, completely unaware of what a courtroom even was. I thought about that letter. Tom had documented his own guilt 7 years ago and mailed it with delivery confirmation. My father, the man who told me we raised you better than to lie, had read that letter and decided that 7 more years of silence was easier than picking up a phone. I've worked hard at staying fair-minded through all of this, because bitterness is a weight you end up carrying completely alone. So here's my honest attempt at fairness. I don't know what they told themselves. I don't know if it was shame or fear, or if Tom's original story had calcified so deeply that the truth simply felt too heavy to face. I don't know if my mother ever pulled that letter back out on a quiet night. I don't know if my father ever drove past a recruiting station and thought about the daughter he'd shut out. I just know that the next morning, I buttoned my dress whites, looked in the mirror, and realized every ribbon on my chest represented a year they had missed on purpose. Emily wandered in around 6:15, rubbing sleep out of her eyes. "You look important, Mom." "Just doing my job, kiddo." She studied me with that fierce little seriousness she brings to everything. "Will you be home for dinner?" "Yes, I'll be home for dinner." Satisfied, she went to find cereal. I picked up my cover, tucked it under my arm, and walked out the door. Naval courtrooms aren't dramatic the way movies make them look. No wood paneling, no gasping crowd. Just fluorescent lighting, folding chairs, and that unmistakable government building smell of recycled air and floor cleaner. The lead investigator, Special Agent Donna Carver, 14 years on the job, the kind of person who's been lied to professionally for so long that nothing surprises her anymore, nodded at me when I walked in. "Commander Mitchell," she said. A pause. "This one's going to be strange for you." "It'll be fine," I told her. The JAG attorney overseeing the proceedings looked me up and down in a single sweep, said "good," and went back to her papers. I didn't need sympathy in that room. I needed the room to function properly. The panel chair, a 31-year veteran with silver hair and a stillness that carried more authority than shouting ever could, had already been briefed on my relationship to the accused. He cleared me to sit on the panel anyway, which told me exactly how much he trusted my record. Tom walked in with his assigned defense counsel, young and clearly over-prepared in the way people get when they already know the evidence is bad. He'd gained weight since I'd last seen him, 12 years earlier, through a closing door. He didn't look at me once as he sat down. My parents arrived a few minutes later. Third row, just like I said. My father in his good gray suit, funerals and job interviews, and apparently this. My mother in a blue cardigan. Watching Tom until she looked up and found me instead. You already know what her face did. I won't describe it twice. The hearing itself was clinical. Methodical. The Navy doesn't do dramatics, it just lays out facts. Over 2 hours, Agent Carver walked the panel through 34 falsified inspection reports, 17 discrepancy logs, and 4 separate witness statements from personnel who'd been pressured into signing off on equipment they'd never actually verified. $340,000 in mishandled equipment. $180,000 of it still unaccounted for, not stolen exactly, just quietly redirected and buried under paperwork that couldn't survive real scrutiny. Petty Officer Mitchell's authorization code appears on all 34 reports, one witness testified. "I told him the equipment hadn't arrived yet," said another. "He told me to log it anyway." Said it was a timing issue. The whole time, I could feel my parents' eyes on me. On the uniform. On the insignia at my collar. On the woman they'd been told didn't exist anymore, sitting at the front of a Navy courtroom wearing oak leaves she'd earned across 12 years they'd chosen to ignore. During the recess, I stepped out to the water fountain. I didn't have to look to know my mother had followed me. "Rachel," she said. I turned around. She looked like she was searching for a place to start and couldn't find one. Her eyes moved from my face to my collar, back to my face. "You're still in the Navy," she said. "Yes, ma'am." 12 years of practice keeping my voice level came in handy right then. My father had come up behind her, studying my insignia like a document written in a language he didn't quite know. "What rank is that?" "Lieutenant Commander." "I've held it 3 years. Before that, 12 years of service your son told you didn't exist." He looked down at the floor of a naval installation, the same floor his daughter had been walking for 15 years without him knowing. Tom stepped out of the courtroom right then. All 4 of us stood in that hallway. Nobody moved. It was the first time in 12 years we'd occupied the same physical space, and it felt exactly like a dream where the geography is wrong, familiar faces stranded in an impossible setting. My father turned to Tom. His voice went low. Past anger, into something colder. "Why?" Tom rubbed the back of his neck, the same tell he's had since childhood, the one he used on every teacher and coach and parent who ever caught him in something. "Because she was doing better than me," he said quietly, almost to himself. And I couldn't stand it. The hallway sat with that for a long moment. "I didn't think it would go this far," he added. "Which part?" I asked. "The lie that cost me my family for 12 years? Or the fraud that's about to cost you your career?" He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw something on his face that wasn't quite remorse, but recognition. The look of a man who has finally run out of road. "Both," he said. I straightened my jacket. Lined up every ribbon. "Neither did I said. Then I walked back into the courtroom. I need to be transparent with you about page 61, because my parents were still standing in that hallway when I decided exactly what I was going to do with it, and once made, that decision couldn't be undone. I had two options. Option 1, say nothing. The letter was personal correspondence, not formal evidence in the fraud case. Nothing about the proceedings required me to bring it up. I could finish my role on the panel, submit my paperwork, go home to Emily, and never mention it again. Option 2, tell them. Not as a weapon, and I want to be precise here, because Tom's own defense counsel later tried to argue in a post-hearing filing that I'd used the letter to inflict emotional damage during active proceedings. That claim went nowhere, and for good reason. I brought the letter to my parents afterward, in a parking lot, with no hearing in session and nothing strategic to gain. I told them because they deserved to understand the full scope of what had been done, not just to me, but to all of us. My father's expression when I handed him that printed page was the most complicated thing I've ever watched cross a person's face. He read it standing in a November parking lot in his good gray suit, lips moving faintly over certain lines. When he finished, he folded it once. Then again. 2014, he said. March. Delivery confirmed. My mother made a sound I'm not going to try to describe. Hand over her mouth again. She turned away for a moment to collect herself. My father looked at me. And what I saw wasn't the guilt or the collapse I'd spent 12 years imagining. It was something simpler and somehow harder to witness. He looked like a man just waking up. I don't know what to say to you, he admitted. I know there isn't anything I could. I know, Dad. He nodded once, the same nod from all those clipped Christmas cards, reduced now to its barest, rawest form. We stood there another minute while the November wind rolled in off the water. My mother straightened her spine, holding herself together through sheer will. Do you want to meet Emily? I asked. Neither of them spoke right away. She's 7, I said. She's out of school by 3. My father started. Yes, my mother said, cutting in before he even finished. Yes, please. Tom's naval career officially ended on a Thursday in December. The panel recommended formal charges. The JAG review confirmed the evidence held up. And Agent Carver's 73-page case survived every single challenge the defense threw at it. Tom took a plea deal, reduced rank, forfeited pay, a formal reprimand, and a less than honorable discharge. He didn't go to prison. I want to be upfront about that, because I know some of you were hoping for that ending. He wasn't pocketing the money outright. He'd just been shuffling shipments around to paper over the gaps, and the gaps kept widening until the cover-up became its own crime. He moved back to Hopewell. Whether that's brave or oblivious, I honestly haven't decided, and I've stopped needing to. My parents came to visit me in Virginia Beach that January. My mother showed up with pot roast packed in a Dutch oven wrapped in dish towels inside a canvas bag, exactly how she's transported that meal my entire life, and the smell of it in my apartment did something to me that an entire day in a courtroom hadn't managed. Emily interrogated them for 45 straight minutes about their house, their car, whether they'd ever seen a real Navy ship, and, critically, my dad's favorite dinosaur. He said Brontosaurus. She informed him, with total confidence, that it's actually called Brachiosaurus now. He accepted the correction gracefully. Later, my mother sat at my kitchen table, looking at the same brand of yellow legal pad she used to write on. I used to use those for letters, she said. I know, I told her. I kept every one you sent me. Right up until they stopped. She went quiet. I kept yours too, she finally said. Even after the one that came back. Why didn't you ever reach out? I asked. Because I didn't know how, she said. By the time I understood what your father and I had done, so much time had passed I didn't know where to even begin. She looked down at her hands. That's not an excuse. I know it isn't. I just want you to know it was never nothing to me. Not 1 year of it. I sat down across from her. In the living room, Emily was walking my father through the entire rank structure of the United States Navy using a diagram she'd drawn herself, and he was listening like it was the most important briefing of his life. I don't have a tidy ending for you. Not the kind where everything resolves and the credits roll. That's not how 12 years of anything works. What I have is a January afternoon. My mother at my kitchen table. My daughter's voice carrying in from the next room. My father's full attention locked onto a 7-year-old's hand-drawn diagram. And on my wrist, the watch I bought myself the day I made lieutenant commander, nothing flashy, built for people who need it to work, not to be admired. It's never once lost a second. Tom knows I found that letter. He knows I handed it to our parents. He hasn't reached out since, and I don't expect him to. But here's what he doesn't know. What I'm only saying out loud for the first time right now. There was a second letter buried in that file, dated 2019. Same format. Same delivery confirmation. In it, Tom had written down my current unit, my rank, and my deployment schedule. Enough detail that our parents could have found me on any single day over the last 7 years, if they'd ever chosen to look. He'd been leaving them a trail of breadcrumbs the whole time, without ever finding the courage to just hand them the map. I don't know what to do with that information. I'm not sure I need to do anything with it at all. If there's one thing 12 years in the Navy actually teaches you, it's this: you don't get to control the conditions you're handed. You only control what you do with them. Tom couldn't stand watching me succeed, so he spent 15 years trying to shrink me down to nothing. Instead, he handed me a courtroom, and I walked into it in dress whites. Last week, Emily asked me what that whole hearing was even about. I told her it was about someone who told a lie for so long, he actually forgot it wasn't the truth anymore. She thought about that for a minute. "Did you fix it?" she asked. "Some of it," I told her. She nodded, completely satisfied. "That counts," she said. And you know what? She's right. It does. If this story hit you the way it hit me writing it, drop a comment below and let me know which part got you the most. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe, because trust me, this isn't the last family secret that's going to come out in this channel.